apologies. I'm still getting used to that. We'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:33 on Zoom. We acknowledge that the offices of the Wilfrid Laurier Students Union is on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. Again, I would like to ask to observe a moment of silence for the new discovery of many unmarked graves in another residential school in Saskatchewan. Thank you, everyone. I hope that this way we can really bring to light with the governments of Canada's, as well as the education history relating to the treatment of Indigenous peoples of this nation. Moving on, as for regrets, I received 2 regrets, one by Director McCarthy and another by Director Symington. Both of them sent regrets in regards to, unfortunately, having to stay a bit longer at their full-time jobs during the summer, but they will be present at the meeting shortly after. I was notified that the latest one of them would be about half an hour. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to amend the agenda as presented? As I see none, can I get a motion on the table to adopt the agenda as presented? Motion by Director Bothwell, seconded by Director Vale. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? Is there none? All those in favor, Director Bothwell? Director Bothwell? I will assume that she's transferring.
Sorry, I cut out. Yeah, sorry, I cut out. I approve.
Okay, thank you. Director Shando?
I approve.
You. Director Del Giudice?
I approve.
Director Loachi?
I approve.
Thank you. Director May?
I approve.
Director Vale?
I approve.
Director Sneedy?
I approve.
I mean, Vice Chair Sneedy. Thank you. Motion passes unanimous consent. Before I go on to the conflict of interest, I'm happy that we have additional guests today in the gallery. I see that one of the guests here has their name F. If it's possible to put your full name or even a name, so in case you have a question to ask, I can come back to you in a proper manner than just calling it F, if that is possible. But going on, are there any conflict of interest declared today? As I see none, next we're going on to comments from the chair of the board and CGO. So I just want to make sure to give you updates on a high level of everything that I've done this coming week. I know that this news has been extremely important for the board, and I appreciate everyone's patience for letting the professional process play out as we receive the information, as well as properly and professionally address the points. As stated, when reaching out to the former directors, we're going to treat everything that they stated in their resignation letter as very seriously and act in good faith. And in that regard, I'm happy to report that we reached out to perform an exit interview with them. And it was with myself, President Yamilov, our HR consultant, Shauna Wei, both the former directors, Iqbal and Mohammed, as well as a representative of their choosing from EDI, Brantford, which was Lauren Burrows. So we had that meeting last Friday on June 18th, and we took some notes, and that is where I'm going to have some updates to present to the board. But before I do so, I just want to give another comment in a more personal matter that last week, as you can imagine, emotions were high amongst the board. I've spent a great deal of patience to getting to learn and listen And I hope that as I kind of present to you these sensitive materials, that we can keep this on topic, as well as just to focus on how to redress this and, make the board better than the original position that initially was at. So moving on to that, I'm not too sure if there are any comments from President Yamlov that she'd like to add into that.
No, I think that you said it all pretty clearly and eloquently, so thanks, but no.
Okay, no problem. I just want to make sure. Then we can move on to the updates on the director resignations and the exit interviews. So as stated in my comments, that process did play out, and I've gathered notes as well as notes from our HR consultant. There were also notes provided by Lauren Burrows, which was the EDI representative, and those I have reached out for, but she told me that she's awaiting approval to send them to the other representatives. But as soon as I receive them, I will let the board know. As some of the comments pertaining to these notes are in reference to in-camera discussion, the document itself will be treated as an in-camera document, but what I will discuss today first will be kind of the more general comments made about some of the points addressed on the resignation letter. Before I move on to that, is there a general consensus from the board for me to release this document to just the directors to have a viewing of it? Let's see some general nods. Okay, perfect. So I will do so. Okay, the note should be sent. So I guess right now we can kind of go into it, and these are some main takeaways. And I'm hoping that what this exercise will be is a learning experience, as I said, for us to kind of grow. And these are some of the issues that were laid out and some of the main points. The directors felt that having productive conversations were difficult during some of the meetings because of the support staff, as well as some other directors would shut down their voices. They felt that it was very hard to get their voices out, and at times they felt that they were being ridiculed with. There were three main components involved in their decision to resign, which was the environment, the comments, as well as the use of in-cameras during the meetings. They also commented that the board is predominantly white male, and that kind of adds to a little bit of difficulties when discussing certain topics. There's a note on that in the group chats, the chair was asked to release a statement and work with operations, but it was dismissed because it was not that serious. There was a lack of structure and knowledge of who to go to if they were not comfortable with going to the chair or vice chair, which was the proper channels. And the main point, which I think is most important for us, is what they're hoping to get out of this process is a general framework for dealing with future issues, not just of this nature, but also with social issues. I think that one big thing that I took away from this was that there was a lack of knowledge on how to resolve conflicts within the board. As I hope many of you guys remember in the training, I very much specified that the discussions, as well as the topics, or how one presents himself on the board is not what can transpire off the board, or in other words, what happens on the board stays on the board. That what is being said is not a reflection of the person, but just simply of the opinion of the time, right? And I think that that's something that we as a board can really work on too as well. There was also a mention of like they at the time they were not aware of issues such as not issues, but support such as conflict resolution, or even restorative justice at the time. And these are some things that I think we can use as a good takeaway. They also recommended that the board should go through EDI training in order to learn how best to handle difficult topics as this. They specified that their main goal is not to seek an apology or acknowledgement, but they want to see how the SU is going to outline steps in the future to allow students know how they're going to handle and take away these issues. In regards to comments about myself, one thing that I can say, especially as your elected chair, that there needs to be a more active presence of myself to call out or participate in taking down inappropriate comments rather than brushing aside, especially in the in-camera or the group chats. And in all of these topics, we're going to have in the for further discussion. As I said earlier before, there were comments made more generally directed to specific instances and situations, but since they do pertain to what was discussed in camera, we unfortunately can't talk about it unless the board wants to move in camera, but I think for the purposes of right now, that's unnecessary. So on that note, I appreciate everyone listening to me about this extremely serious issue, and right now I'm going to open the floor for questions right now before we move on to our additional topics of discussion. Yes, Director Loachi.
Sorry, but should it not have been the chair's job to let them know of the resources they could have gone to? Because right now I'm just hearing a lot of blame shifting.
Well, one thing that I can definitely say is that unfortunately, I did not receive any news about their about any of the issues that were being discussed prior to this. So for me, that either could have been a failure on my part to infer that they were, being hurt during the meetings, or it could also have been that they were uncomfortable with talking to me or the vice chair, which would have been the normal channels. Yes, Director Loachi again.
Sorry. So, from my understanding, attempts were made to reach out to you, and a conversation was requested to be had. But what's it called? The messages were ignored, and you took 2 weeks to get back to directors.
So this is another point which I'm going to address during our communication piece, but I can say with full confidence that prior to the last board meeting on June, pardon me, time flies a bit, June 10th, the former director, Iqbal, reached out to me to have a conversation about certain issues about the board, and it was a general meeting. This for me was not the first time that Director Iqbal reached out to me. I sent her a welcoming message saying that I'm more than available and happy to do so. She sent me times and dates. I messaged her on the Friday confirming that I'm happy to have a meeting. And that message was unfortunately left unread until I received the resignation letter on Monday. I hope that answers your question, Director Loachi.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. There are some pieces that I do want to discuss in terms of ways that I think I could have done better as a chair, and I want to make sure that this is all public and seen. As for moving forward in terms of how we deal with this as a board, I'm going to lay out the process as we continue on, which I believe is our next agenda item, which is the board policy and EDI training discussion. So I think that so I reached out to each director in a personal capacity to make sure and understand, because I think one of the greatest issues that led to the escalation of this situation was just a general unawareness from parties, right? And I want to say this very carefully because when people are on the receiving end of a uncomfortable environment such as the ones that are levied in the resignation letters, each person's experience is different, right? So this is not a one-step fix-all solution, but I think the best way that we can go about this is to make sure that we all listen to each other and understand. And some of the big things which I think we can take away is that there was a fundamental misunderstanding in terms of the role of the board, as well as how we should conduct each other in the board, given some of the topics that we discussed. So is my recommendation, and this is for discussion for the rest of the board, that we should have another training session to kind of go over the policy so we can have a much more clear understanding of the board's role as in terms of governance, because that's what we are, and its relationship with kind of the operational itch that I've seen some directors really yearn for. On top of that, taking to heart the comments made during the exit interview, as well as some other directors, I think the idea of having an EDI or diversity training is more than welcome for all directors, so we can, make sure that we are all in this together and that we are a team. And we want to make sure that us as colleagues were very comfortable with discussing some of these very difficult topics together. Interspersed with that is my hope that we can also include some sort of team building activity in lieu of a board social, because I think another addition to the problem was that since we're so new to the board and we haven't really had a chance to really interact with each other, engaging in meetings, I recognize, can be very difficult, and it feels like you're playing more on the defensive side rather than actually engaging in like a dialect of ideas. So I'm hoping that that this will be added to it to kind of help break the ice between all of us. Again, I opened the floor to the gallery and the board for questions, ideas, and if this is something that you're welcome to deal with. Yes, Vice Chair Sneedy.
I'm open to the idea of having that training. And to follow up with that, is it safe to say that EDI training would consist of resources and staff who are not board resources?
Precisely, yes. Thank you for
Okay.
reminding me. So in terms of board policy, this will not be run by our full-time resources. This is actually going to be run by an external member. If I can, give me 1 second. This will be by Eileen Mercier, and if someone can correct me if I'm getting the information wrong. And she's an absolutely fantastic resource with years of experience in multiple organizations. To give you a brief summary, she was the chair of the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan from 2007 to 2014. She has a career in general management across different financial services, communication, and she currently serves on the board of Intact Financial Corporation. Yes, Executive Director Champagne.
So I believe specifically Director Sanidi was looking for information on the EDI, or was it the board training specifically?
I heard EDI training, so I asked
Right.
if EDI
So-
training was
my
would-
apologies.
would- basically who would be
so-
delivering it, if that helps.
So if I may.
Yep.
Nothing has been decided yet. We have not reached out. We want to make sure that the board is all on the same page before we reach out to the professionals in those fields. So those trainings will be done by folks who are actually qualified to do those trainings. The idea that Chair Dang put forward for Eileen Mercier is more about governance training. And she would ultimately be, to use video game technology, the final boss in the training because of her experience and her connection to Laurier, et cetera. But to answer the question that was directly asked, nobody has been approached yet. The purpose of this conversation is to kind of define that everybody is okay with us moving forward with that plan. And we will work with Andrew to kind of make connections within, whether that's the Center for Student Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, or somebody higher up, or somebody external to the university. All of that will be determined and put forward as a final kind of proposal.
Thank you for answering my second question, Phil.
Yes. And my apologies for mishearing that. I heard the policy part and then I kind of went on that little tangent.
It's all right. Phil read my mind there.
Yeah,
Thank
but,
you so much.
just to kind of touch on that too as well, the presentation I included, that's not a binding one. That's just a sample that was given to me by request by our HR consultant. But what it does have is 3 of our free staff members from CSEDI who she highly recommends as supports to be part of the process. But going back to questions, yes, Director Bothwell.
Okay, so first of all, I think going forward with EDI training is a very good idea. I just want to, I guess, like ask. So in the comments, it mentioned that, or you mentioned, Andrew, that we don't really have like the best understanding of the role of the board. So I was wondering if we would do like another training just to try to like solidify like the understanding of what our role is on the board, so that we make sure like stepping like out of bounds, if that makes sense.
Yes, and that now I can talk about Eileen Mercier, because she's the one who has
Okay.
years of experience doing this. Fantastic resume, and she's not at all related to our organization, so she would be in effect kind of a really great addition to kind of the training that we initially received. If that makes
Okay.
sense, right? So because I could,
Well,
sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say though, like, because I know our board has different rules compared to other boards of directors. So like, I think we just need to know like if we're gonna get training from a separate external source, I think that's a really good idea. I just think we also need to make sure we know the roles of our specific role board of directors, like Laurier Student Union board of directors, and our scope versus, like, I know we like went over it in training, but I think it would be very, very beneficial if we could just kind of go over it again.
Yeah, and just one thing I want to also point out is that she's not a definite person that's going to come in. We still have to reach for her and kind of finalize the ideas. But even if that plan cannot be facilitated, the idea would be to try and get someone outside of our organization to give us a different perspective per se.
Okay.
I hope that
That
answers
makes
your
sense.
question, Director Bothwell.
Yeah, and then I know Phil wants to say something, but I also have a question after. If you can
No
come back
problem.
to
Put you on the
me.
speakers list. Yes, Executive Director Champagne.
Thank you. So the idea that has been bantied about so far in terms of training is not one training session to kind of fix all of our woes, as it were. But it would be kind of a series of discussions that would have external folks that understand the policy governance model, and some alumni that have been inside the student union model, to help kind of explain how that kind of has all worked and how the student voice is heard that way, how the policy governance model is supposed to execute when it's being executed well. And then ultimately the whole thing would culminate as a series of training sessions and hopefully culminate in a session by Eileen Mercier, who is the chancellor of the university, and has, as Andrew said, a wealth of experience with all kinds of governance models. And hopefully what her presentation would be is what does good governance look like and what it can do for you individually and as a group. So involved in all, it'll be multiple sessions led by multiple people that are not directly involved with the Students' Union at this current time.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and so that's a point that I forgot to mention, that there would be the idea would be also to invite other jurors too as well. To kind of give you a bit of context, about 2 years ago, me and a former director Borges, decided to try and host an event called the Innovation Forum, and that was to invite former chairs who are now acting as lawyers or arcing in the area and giving their experience and their ideas, and really addressing kind of like some of the struggles they had in their experience, but also kind of like their best experiences and how to make the most of this role, and like a full understanding of governance too as well. But yeah, back on the speakers list, Director Bothwell.
Well, yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So just another follow-up question I have then is that you mentioned we do like team bonding, something in the lines of that. Do you have anything in mind right now, or is that just kind of still brainstorming in the works?
I mean, for me, it would probably be to maybe hire some external company to do some sort of fun, interactive, like, afternoon session with us, right? I'm like, it's still very tentative, but what I can clearly say that I myself am extremely invested in, building, strong connections, with us together, and I'm willing to be open to suggestions, but also to invest some of the budget that I have allocated as a CGO and chair to it. So I hope that builds some confidence into that. answer.
Yeah, it does. And were you thinking like we would try to do it in person when restrictions open up, or is it going to be?
I mean, in a perfect world, I
Yeah.
would just have us go to Canada's Wonderland. In a perfect world, but trust me, it's been something that has not just been this board, but many boards. We're owed a Canada's Wonderland trip, but just due to the restrictions and due to the kind of rising cases, especially in the Waterloo region, I think it would probably be best to just have it as a online scenario, which I know it sucks, but I'm hoping that with this kind of current situation, we can learn and grow from it together. It'll enable us to, when things open up, to have that secondary session too as well, in person. Does that answer the question, Director Bothwell?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions that directors have regarding the policy and EDI training? As I see now, I'm assuming that most directors are happy or agree that this is the right steps to go forward. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Next, we're going to move on to board communication and conduct discussion. So this is now, again, addressing some of the points. So some of the points were made were that the chair did not properly shut down comments that were made in group chats or online. And this is something that has been an issue that I've seen, where some directors will say something and then there will be a follow-up group chat between two other directors separately that I'm not aware of. And that's where some of these additional kind of like conflicts arise from. And the one thing that I will say that is that this was kind of the point that at the beginning of the year that was made about how to avoid bad governance, which was the fact that having these separate group chats and not as a board as a whole invites these kind of private comments, and it then unfortunately becomes a hearsay situation where someone says something terrible or that offended the other person, but because I'm not aware of it, or even if there is a reference of it back in the main chat that I'm there, I unfortunately lack the entire context to help resolve that situation. So this is something that I've definitely noticed, and one of the recommendations that I have is to migrate our conversations from the Facebook Messenger group into Microsoft Teams. So then there is at least some sort of, I guess, accountability and a track record, because the last thing I want is the continuation of kind of these private conversations. And these are just things that if I'm not aware about the problem, how can I possibly help, resolve it? I'm going to open up the floor again to kind of suggestions and questions about that if directors are okay, or maybe to add some additional comments to that. Yes, Director Loachi.
Sorry, I'm just not really sure how shifting the conversation from Messenger to Microsoft Teams is going to help. Because a lot of the comments that were made and that people were unhappy about were made in the main group chat, which you are a part of.
Mm-hmm. But then I was made aware that there were some separate chats that were a follow-up to some of those comments, right? And unfortunately, I can't do anything about that unless both sides come together, right? Because by no means does my authority extend to beyond outside the boardroom into these private conversations. Yes, back to you, Director Loachi.
So I understand that you can't have control over private conversations. Totally understand. But you didn't step in when comments were made in the main group chat, which you are a part of.
Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, this comes back to the issue that no one told me. And yes, what one or yourself can be absolutely critical of me not being aware of some of these things. But I think this comes back to another issue in terms of when I get to my next piece, which is the conduct piece, which is that I can't do anything unless people tell me what the problem is. And that's kind of another thing. And yes, migrating to Microsoft Teams might not completely solve it, but I think then it at least provides a more secure environment that I can actually properly go back and check things, through from a more professional stance. Yes, Director Loachi.
So I understand that you can't deal with the private conversations and comments made on the side, but you didn't deal with the comments that were made in the group chat that you are a part of that you can scroll back to see.
But the thing is that, again, no one has mentioned that to me, right? Which is the unfortunate thing. The part where I'm going to go in towards, which is hopefully to answer your question about like the appearance of a lack of response. I will talk about in that the conduct part, but I'm just hoping that by migrating to Microsoft Teams away from Facebook, just help keep things more on track. Director Boffa, I did see your hand up. Would you like to be added to the speakers list or no?
No, it's okay.
Okay, now I will go into my conduct part of the discussion. So for some of the areas that were made that I was aware of, during public meetings in cameras or group chats, I did have a message with the directors involved to halt some of those topics, or even just to speak to them about that. From the way I conducted it, it regrettably was not the best in hindsight after speaking to our HR consultant. So to kind of give you a bit of background to everyone, the way I conducted it was very professional, or at least in my mind was professional. I did not want to make it, incredibly huge and sprawled all over the board's group chat. It was a conversation that I just had, a message, an email to the director, and just notifying them of that. But I was made aware and consulted with by our HR consultant, Shauna Way, that what I should have done, which was part of the EDI process, was to finish the circle, which was then to let the board as a whole know that I did such actions too as well, but in a professional way, not targeted and to throw additional flame to accusations and that type of nature to inflame the environment. So that is an area that I regrettably did not follow up on, and that I can imagine did not provide a resolution to some directors who saw those comments on the group chats. Does anyone have any questions or any suggestions or comments that they'd like to make to me in that respect? I hope that this answers your question, earlier question, Director Loachi. Director Bothwell.
So wait, so you're saying that you did reach out to a director when you found about a message in a group chat? Is that
or
what you're
comments made during meetings? Yes.
So you have reached out to people to talk
I
to resolve
have
it,
reached out to the ones that were most apparent, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But then as you can see, because as I said, this is where the failures of my part have come into play, where I did not let people know that such an event transpired, right? Because for me, I was trying to keep it very, in other terms, professional. But I now realize that what should have been done was to let people know about that actions were taken.
Yeah, I definitely think unnecessary tension has been created in that case because people think that things haven't been resolved. And I think that communication piece, if we had known oh yeah, we've it's been resolved internally, would kind of probably give people a better outlook on things versus when we think things are just ignored. So I do appreciate you telling us that you reached out to people, because otherwise I wouldn't have known. So
yes, and that isn't a mistake that I'm very much ready to make. There's no other ways about it, that I wasn't aware of kind of the human aspect of kind of these comments. I just treat it as a very professional and trying to stop them from happening in the future again. But I do hope that this also opens the conversation that if there is comments that were made that you think are not appropriate for the chats or even the meetings and things like that. And if I don't shut it down via the process that I've laid out right now moving forward, then please inform me, because I think that, as I said before, a lot of these issues stem from just directors and parties just not being aware of these things and the effects that they have on each other. Is there any questions or additional questions regarding that? If not, I'm going to move to the final part discussion. So I'm going to tackle this topic very delicately, but there was a director who posted additional posts regarding the resignation that was a breach of policy, and I'm just going to mention this to the board that in the future, please not do this. This is not a means for the board to silence that particular director, but it's to prevent additional legal risk, which is the next part of our discussion, because with that type of post, and with the current, being a member of the board, it is technically one can construe as a mission of guilt, and that could potentially be opening up the board for legal risk. Yes, Director Loachi.
Sorry, would asking this director not to post not just be continuing behavior of silencing directors? I know you're saying it's not, but it really is.
Mhm.
As well, the policy cited was, sorry, let me just pull up the policy. I believe it was GP2C3 and GP2C4. Was those policies are regarding fiduciary responsibilities. It has nothing to do with social media.
Although it does have anything to do with social media, to answer your question, it's still contact with the outside, with the press, by any large sense, because one has to remember that any message on behalf of the board, or even construed relationship to the board, has to be approved by all directors, and that's kind of the fundamental reason why I've done a lot of work to try and get a social media committee up this year, to kind of like, to create expedited process for governance, right? Even though the post was not made directly as a director, because the member was a serving director, it just opens up our organizational to additional risk. Although I'm going to get to more updates with that, it's just unnecessary risk and unnecessary tension that's created, and because this process should be treated as an HR one, right? Some directors were disaffected by the board. Certain things happened, right? But because of the seriousness of the comments made, there was the potential and the fear of legal action, which is why we took great leaps and steps to go about gathering as much information as possible can, and just simply adding an additional post of that nature was just would just detract from all of that. Yes, Director Loachi.
So what legal risk would that be opening up the organization to? Because as far as I can see, there's no legal risk.
I mean, the fact that if comments were, if based on how the people were interpreting it, one could technically interpret, not trying to quote the Instagram post too much, but since there were comments saying that the board created a toxic environment for BIPOC people, that could technically be HR complication there, that we create a toxic work environment, and that those two directors resigned based on that too as well. And there are just numerous ways that, if not just legal risk, reputational risk too as well to our organization. Yes, Director Loachi.
Would brushing things under the rug not just be continuing to open up the organization to greater risk?
Mhm.
Because by not acknowledging things and not allowing conversation on these types of topics, we can't move forward and we can't resolve things.
And that is an absolutely fair point, Director Lochi. And I do want to say that in this instance where both sides had sufficient information to navigate it, I would then say absolutely then trying to post as a individual is trying to brush under the rug, but just simply because you know as the chair, I received no information about any of these issues. My message was left unread. The email I received was complete out of the blue, and then 10 minutes after the email was sent, this letter appeared online. It took it away from being a HR issue that we as an organization professionally handle into something that could have exploded onto the greater media sphere. And a member of the organization, posting an admission, almost what could be construed as admission of guilt without even the members of the organization having the full details, like equally, that's what constitutes the additional risk. I hope that answers your question there. Perfect. It's mere like I will give you a very quick example before I move on to the next meeting, the next discussion point. A director is more than happy to post about any type of issue that they so desire in terms of social activism or things like that. It just can't do it under the guise of the board, right? And the only issue with this was because that person was a sitting member and was connected directly to the board and the post was directly related to the board, that's where that complication occurred. So I hope that answers it. And I'm sure as a board, we're going to move forward with this together, especially once we have the social media committee set up. Next on the agenda, we have the legal counsel updates and statements discussions. So I sent everyone an updated statement that was amended by our lawyers on retainer. This was something that we could publish to acknowledge the resignation of the directors, as well as to our acknowledgement that we are taking the matter seriously, and as we can see now, allowing the process to play out to resolve and hopefully improve and fix any of the allegations if they are true. The second update that I have to give is that so majority of directors, an overwhelming majority of directors, approved of having the legal counsel review the in-cameras on the contingent that the client solicitor privilege would be relationship would be intact there, and that the in-cameras would not be sent out for public circulation. But on that note, given the developments in our in the situation here, it's been determined that there is no need for that, and that we can simply close that case. But that being said, now we're going to move on to the decision by the board whether or not to approve of the statement to be sent to be published in relation to this. So I'm opening the floor up for discussion in this matter. Do any directors have any comments or concerns about the statement that was presented? For additional context, this was something that was that had originally had the recommendations and advice from the deans of students, and then after that was sent to our lawyers. Yes, Director Loachi.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where the acknowledgement of the board's actions are in the statement, because as far as I can tell, it doesn't seem like the board's really taking responsibility for actions.
I mean, the last part of the sentence is kind of what inherently does it. Well, sorry, that's not the right word, choice of words. Inherently implies that. Director Bothwell.
I'm just wondering, or not sharing with the public as of yet, shouldn't this be something discussed in camera?
This
Because we can't really discuss the exactly what it says in the statement and how we want to nitpick it, is my understanding.
I suppose we could we could go in camera, but I think that there would not be too much risk in just you know, having the open discussion here right now publicly regarding the statement.
Okay, I just wasn't sure because you said it was a confidential statement, so I just.
It was confidential at the time because I didn't want it to be leaked out ahead of the meeting, right?
Okay.
And because that would be taking our words you know, out of context, but I could be wrong. Yes, Executive Director Champagne.
So what I might suggest is the statement that we are referencing at this
Mhm.
point no longer does what it was designed to do.
Mhm.
And I think the board has heard that both you and President Jamaloff have met with the former directors, listened and learned from their experience, and is in the process of setting up a course forward to make sure that the board is better set up for success in a variety of different ways.
Mhm.
And that ultimately the board can release a statement kind of summarizing what has happened and what the course of action is moving forward. So I think that now that you've had the opportunity to discuss what a training session, what a series of training sessions looks like for everyone to get better, that would be the statement acknowledging that, you know, harm was done, discussion had been had, listening and learning was done as a result of that. And this is the path that the board is choosing to move forward. That seems to be in line with what the retired, my apologies, the resigned directors had requested.
Thank you for clarifying that, Phil. I felt like I had my foot in my mouth when trying to explain it. And I hope that that kind of answers the original question that I was trying to improperly answer by Director Lorchi, that the last line of the sentence, I suppose I can share my screen for everyone to see the proposed statement here. So it's, we acknowledge that the two members of the Students' Union Board of Directors have recently resigned. The Students' Union strives to ensure that all of its volunteers, including all of its directors, have a positive experience throughout their involvement. Unfortunately, the two individuals who recently resigned from the board indicate a much more negative experience. The Students' Union takes the issues and concerns expressed by the departing directors very seriously and will, as a result, undertake an internal review of how board meetings are run in order to avoid situations like this occurring in the future. So to kind of answer your question, I think the last sentence there really does essentially state that we acknowledge their negative experience and that we are taking steps to it. And how it transpires out is, as we kind of just saw here in this meeting here, and will be ongoing too as well. This is not a an act that will occur just at the end of this meeting here. But going back to Director Bothwell.
Yeah, just to add what like Phil said, like he mentioned how, or sorry, he mentioned that like you guys did like kind of meet with the resigned directors, you and President Jamaloff, and you guys came up with a plan. So in my mind, the last sentence saying will, as a result, undertake an internal review, it kind of seems like you guys have undertaken an internal review. Like I feel like it should say like has undertaken an internal review, because if we're going to go forward with EDI training and things like that, I just want to, because like as he was saying, it kind of seems like we've already.
No, that's a perfect point, because this statement was made with the potential that it would be released prior to this emergency meeting. So as one can imagine, a lot of things have happened behind the scenes to get us to this point. But I still believe that this, in essence, really summarizes like, you know, the sentiments of the board perfectly right now, and how we all together, I hope, are willing to go through this process together and come out better. I hope that answers your question, Director Bothwell. Or do you have another one?
Yeah, I just think like we should like amend the statement to reflect that.
Perfect. And if the board motions to agree to publish a statement, then we can amend it to have the change of tense there.
Okay.
With that being said, is there any other questions regarding this? As anyone else? Okay, if not, then can I get a motion on the table for the board to publish this statement recognizing the resignation of our two directors with the amended change to the tense to recognize that we have already started the undertaking of this process. Motion by Director Vale, seconded by Director Del Giudice. Would you like to speak to your motions? Any discussion on the matter? Director Shandok, is that hand for the motion or hand? Oh, okay. Can any discussion on the matter? If not, all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
I approve.
Director Shandok,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director Loachi,
I approve.
Director May.
I approve.
We have Director McCarthy, I assume not. Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Cindy.
I approve.
Motion passes with unanimous consent. Okay. Moving on to the next agenda topic is the board vacancy decision. So, as with the with the news, of our directors resigning, it's taken me quite a while to come up with the proper plan, but here it is. So this is in reference to the Students' Union Constitution, Article 4, Section 7. And in terms of filling the vacancy, we have one Brantford director only, and now 10 Waterloo directors. Sorry, 9 Waterloo directors. So there are many methods that we can do to fill in the vacancy according to our constitution. One such method is if we refer to section 7.b, we can invite the runner up to the races of the last general election to fulfill the vacancy. So there was all the Waterloo directors were acclaimed, so that's not an option. But on the Brantford side, there was one additional Brantford director that ran that got third place. And with the Constitution, we can vote as a board together to invite her to come in and fulfill the role as Brantford director for the remainder of Director Iqbal's term. A second option is that we can call a general election, in this case would be a by-election, as soon as possible and fill in both seats. To give context to board, in my experience on the first year of my board, one director did resign due to having them graduate earlier than expected. And the board was able to operate with just 11 directors. So by all means, we can just go with the first option and not have to go to an election. However, there are merits to having an election. We can use this as an opportunity to reach out to the ownership again. And especially with the coming up year of potential hybrid classes, this might be a really great opportunity to reach out to everyone and have a full board. But there are costs, time, and money associated with this option. So by no means do we have to make a decision today, but the sooner the decision is made, the better. And now I'm opening up the floor to questions in regard to this. Yes, Director Vale.
I guess I'm just wondering, seeing as I guess assuming we were to fill, like we want to fill both, and for the Waterloo, it would have to be presumably a by-election anyway, since we don't have any runners up to fill. I guess I'm wondering in terms of like sort of the timelines or costs, like is this going to be like a the best option suitable, I guess. But also I think in some respects it might be a beneficial, that it might give an opportunity to help really promote and gear up people for election season, to kind of help really engage, maybe allow people who didn't get a chance before to run in the last election, maybe put their name forward this time. But I guess the one concern I might have is, being sort of the summertime, not as many people are at school, whether that could pose a challenge to getting candidates as well. So I'm just a thought there.
Oh, no, and these are all very much fair points that have been in my thought as well as in discussion behind the scene. But just to kind of answer your question, if we, let's say, like the more important thing is to make sure that we have 2 Brantford directors, right? Just simply due to the proportion of representation, right? We have 9 Waterloo directors. That's like 9% of what the original capacity is. So if we want to avoid the cost and the effort and things like that, we could just go with the filling in the vacant position with the runner-up, if that makes sense. As for the additional information and historic examples of when this by-election is, I'm going to refer it to our full-time resource, and I think they have their hand already up. So I'm going to defer it to Executive Director Champagne.
Yeah, so it's been a very long time since we've done a by-election. Quite possibly even my undergrad, which should put it all into context. But what I might suggest is that, and I don't know what the feasibility of this is, so I may look to Director of Policy Research and Advocacy, Ian Muller, to help me out with this. But if there's not necessarily an immediate need, it might be an opportunity for us to do information sessions and recruitment to do an early fall, so September by-election, where we can do some work within the orientation week programs to talk to first-year students, second-year students, upper-year students, and hopefully at that point we will have done enough sessions to learn from our previous mistakes. And the board will be better set up for anybody to come aboard and be successful. So again, I don't know if we can wait until September, but that I believe that September would be ripe with opportunity. Oh,
I hope
I
that answered that question there, Director Vale, too, as well, regarding the historic presidency.
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. So I unfortunately did lose track of the order, so you must forgive me if I did not. I'm not going to pick you in the order that you raise your hands. Director Del Giudice.
All right. You explained that there will be some resources involved in holding a by-election. I assume that also refers to financial resources. How much would this potential by-election cost? And how much of a dent would it put into our budget, approximately?
I can't give, I can only give ballpark figures because I can tell you exactly what the budget would kind of be allocated towards. It would be allocated towards the rent of the database that we use to facilitate the online elections, and this would be yet another online election. It'll probably be additional resources for campaigning and things like that. If we are going to allow the potential directors to have a budget that they can use to campaign online and things like that. But to that extent, the cost should be in a couple of hundreds of dollars, if not to 1,000. But I'm sure that the full-time resource can correct me if I'm wrong, because this is where I'm going to fully admit we're getting into very new territory in my experience.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hope that explains that. Well, Director Fluici.
Sorry, were you hoping for us to actually come up with a number now?
I don't think there's an expectation for that, but I think what I have done is wrote on my notes for a follow-up, because I don't think, as much as I know you guys have great experience, I don't think you have those numbers immediately on hand, right?
It won't take too much effort, so we'll see if we can get it before this meeting is over. My apologies for interrupting.
No worries. Okay, Vice Chair Sneedy.
So just whether we have a by-election, whether we have a by-election or not, just to be clear, it doesn't necessarily have to be one Brantford, one Waterloo. It can be 2 Brantford directors. Just want to make that very clear. the bottom line is that we need at least 2 directors from each campus, and right now we only have 1 Brantford director. So regardless of what ends up happening regarding the vacancies, I just want to be clear, this is not one of each. It can be 2 Brantford directors, and I know that representation on the Brantford campus has been a large talking point when it comes to student union elections. So I just want to make that very clear.
No, thank you so much. That's a very good point, Vice Chair Cindy. Okay, next, Director Loachi.
So I agree with Executive Director Champagne that a by-election would be best held in the fall. I think that way we'll get students who are fresh, interested, and ready to contribute to the board, rather than simply choosing the person who came in third for the Brantford directors.
Okay, no, thank you for those comments. Director Bothwell.
Agree with Kiana and that we should, or sorry, Director Loachi, that we should be hosting it in the fall. But my one concern / question is, would that mean that first years can run? Because it's for the 2021-2022 year, and they would be first years. And to my understanding, like you have to be like the elections are held for the next academic year, so it's typically people year 2 to 4 on the board. So how can we navigate around that if it's if we're like hosting elections when people are in first year?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I think Phil just popped in the chat there. I have to apologize to some directors who actually asked me that question before early on, because I was under the assumption that you had to have at least 1 year experience at Laurier to run. But I guess those new first years are eligible, and
but they have to be 18, right? That's what
I believe so. Yes, I believe so, according to the elections policies.
Okay. Yeah, it's just like, it would be interesting if the first year they've been on campus for 1 day and they're like, oh, now I know everything about Laurier. So.
I mean, hey, you know what? I think that just shows kind of the level of marketing that Laurier has. I mean, I fell in love with this campus the first time I stepped on it during open house. Never thought I would be up here though. I hope that answers. Sorry.
I guess they still have to be nominated by 50 people too. So.
That would be the only issue though. I will say that is because with the if we're continuing with and I believe we are continuing with the current nomination package signatures methodology of getting people as like actual nominees on the ballot, the new students would be at the grave disadvantage.
Yeah.
Unless they're living on residence, but. And I think these are kind of discussions that if we do go to by-election, we probably will definitely address.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Back to you, Director Loachi.
Yeah, so in regards to the first year class, we've got a massive first year class coming in part due to the pandemic. A lot of people took a year off, so their age would not be a factor for eligibility. They would be, or most of them would be, over 18. But in regards to budgeting for their campaign, as they would be joining this board, would it not be best practice to kind of just have them campaign online without a budget to kind of keep things consistent?
That is certainly a discussion that we can have, and I believe that the general consensus of the board is leaning towards to by-election. This is the time where now I wish we could have a CRO on hand to really help with this and be an expert on these election policy matters. But this is something that I believe that in the last election online there was the reimbursement process, but that's not really the biggest part of the budget, the allocation. I mean, especially with online, the budget was already lower for each candidate. The main financial concerns would probably be the software that we have to purchase. So that is the thing. But if this is the decision of the board, I'm sure that we can more than able to play around with the budget to fit that cost in there. Does that answer your question, Director Loachi?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, and thank you for the additional information there. Yes, it was $50 per director. So if let's say there is a consensus that this is just all going to be done purely online and heavily reliant on social media, maybe we can decide to not have any reimbursements there or not. But I assume that based on the kind of the turnout that we had last year, that would be the more negligible part of our budget. Yeah. Any other further discussions on the floor here? Okay, perfect. So if we do decide to motion to have a fall by-election, we can get started and have the operations team present to us in the July 8th board meeting. Just to kind of reiterate what the Executive Director Champagne is putting in the chat. Yes, Director Bothwell.
So if we move forward with a by-election, does that mean that we need to hire an election chair too? Like a new one?
This is where I'm going to have to defer to our full-time resource to help inform me, if possible.
So many moons ago, there was a person who was sitting in the position that Ian now holds. He was actually technically the CRO, and that in the process of a by-election, ultimately would be the board's decision. So you could open up hiring and hire a CRO early, or we could talk internally to find out what the resources are and see if there's a way to kind of facilitate that role internally. Unfortunately, Ian won't be available at that time because he will be taking a paternity leave at that time, assuming that everything takes place in September. So we would definitely be able to kind of present options at the next meeting with a potential budget for the board to kind of have an educated discussion on and ultimately make a decision.
I hope that provides sufficient information to Director Bothwell in that regard.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, moving on. Director Vale.
Just a thought, but maybe we sort of, have some of this information come back at the next meeting, kind of maybe decide then. Might be a better approach since we're meeting on, I think, what, 2 weeks roughly, or something like that.
Yeah, we're more than able to motion to defer this decision until the next meeting when we have more information. If that is kind of what the board's leaning towards, to have more information, be more prepared. Director Bothwell.
My thoughts of this is we could just, if everyone's on board, we can motion to have, like, hold off on having go the by-election route and hold off to have that until September, and then we can make the more like crucial decisions on like CRO, etc. later when Phil and Ian like present all the information.
My apologies. Wait, could you just repeat what you just said?
Yeah, sorry. I was saying, like, in my opinion, it kind of seems like everybody is on, like, they're planning on going the same route where we want to have a by-election. So can we bring a motion to vote on just the by-election part and then move forward with more information in July?
I'm gonna defer this to Executive Director Champagne again.
So I think the board can obviously do that if they want, but they also can just make a motion to defer to 2 weeks from now when there's more information, and then that way they can for sure make an educated decision on the by-election in the fall. I don't think it matters one way or the other, is basically what I'm getting at.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't really matter then. That's fine.
Yeah, because I do agree with you, Director Buffalo. It does very much seem like there is the general consensus that we want to have a by-election here. Which is more of just a matter of semantics of, like, when do we start kind of putting, the boots in the ground in terms of those plans. Yeah, I'm going to go to Director Vale, and then if you still have a question, I can come back to you, Director Buffalo.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, I guess, to be brutally honest, I'm not really I just don't feel prepared to make a decision today on this. I feel
Mhm.
like I kind of want a bit more time to think about this, consider it, and get. So I feel like deferring it a couple of weeks, I think might be just helpful to see like is it worth having a by-election or kind of see what options are. Just think about this more rather than trying to because I just don't want to rush to a decision. It feels like because obviously we want to certainly this is an important process, if you will, right, to ensure that we're the directors on like the replacements.
Okay. Yes. Do we have any other questions or concerns? Because I'm more than happy to defer and then have another proper presentation to the whole board 2 weeks from now, and then we can get a clearer sense of it. Unless you guys want to have the vote now to confirm, but I will I'm more in the terms of the recommendation that we just defer the vote, because then that allows me to have time to properly present to you not just the budget, but also what the kind of like capabilities and resources we're going to have to leverage to get it done, because this will be a big thing. Holding election is not just simply pouring money and people at it. It requires a a good sense of commitment, and as well as a real good coordinated marketing from all of us. So is there kind of a couple nods that we can defer it then? Okay, so can I get a motion on the table to then defer the decision to fill the vacancy with a by-election until the July 8th meeting, when I can provide more information? Motion by Director Loachi, seconded by Director Shandok. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
I approve.
Director Shandok,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director Loachi,
I approve.
Director May.
I approve.
Is Director McCarthy here? I do not think so. Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
Okay, the motion passed with unanimous consent. I will come back in 2 weeks' time and have a proper presentation for the board. And who knows, this could potentially be a great way, as Phil said, to test out our social media skills with our committee. Okay, next we are going to move on to the I believe it is the final part of our meeting today. So this is the committee elections. So unfortunately, with the news of the resignation of Director Iqbal and Director Mohammed, Director Iqbal was a member of the Direct Inspection Committee GP2G, and due to the resignation, that committee now has one vacancy. So we're now going to hold another committee elections for one spot on the committee. It can be held by any director regardless of campus. I'm now opening up the floors for nominations. Vice Chair Sneedy.
I'd like to nominate Director Del Giudice.
Director Del Giudice, do you stand?
I do.
Sorry, Director Loachi, did you want to nominate someone too as well?
Oh, I was going to nominate Director Del Giudice.
Oh, it seems like you're very popular on the board today, Director Del Giudice. Okay, that's awesome. Do we have any other nominations? Anyone want to try and play their dice in an election? Opening statements, question periods, closing statements, No. Any other nominations? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, in that case, can I get a motion on the table for the acclamation of Director Del Giudice to the Direct Inspection Committee GP2G? Motion by Director Loachi, seconded by Director Bothwell. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter?
Would I have to abstain from this vote because I'm already on this committee?
I believe so, given our current practice.
So Director Del Giudice, please do not be offended when I abstain.
That point will be noted on the record. Yes, moving on. So now all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
I approve.
Director Shando,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I abstain.
Director Loichi,
I approve.
Director May,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I abstain.
The motion passes 6-0 to 2. Okay, now for new business and announcements. Does anyone have any announcements or anything what they'd like to say? Okay, I'm just gonna say something, and this is coming from not me as chair, but me as Andrew, a person, a student at Laurier, and I just want to say that I really appreciate everyone's patience with the process, and and I hope that your voices are being heard, and that and I hope that when I reach out to you, you can show that I truly do care about all of you, as a mentor, as a leader, and even as a friend too as well. So I'm really hoping that we can come together out of this together and stronger than before. And that if you ever need anything, truly not as your chair, but just as a person, I recognize that, and I want to be there for you guys. So yeah. On that note, if there's no other new business announcements, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting then? Motion by Director Shandok, seconded by Director Vale. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
I approve.
Director Shandok,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director Loachi,
I approve.
Director May,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
Motion carries unanimously. Have a wonderful evening today, guys, and I'll see you all on July 8th. Thank you so much.
Go Vegas.
Yes, and I will be reaching out to everyone in regards to the process, following up as discussed. But yeah, if anyone wants to talk to me, I'm more than happy to stay around and chat.
Just stop recording.
Thank you.